Hey y'all, we're back out here at the range like usual. Today we are going to be talking about this blade from Steve Callari Custom Knives. And we're going to talk about why I did not, and honestly do not, want to review this knife. I'm going to show you some things up close today. This will be mostly a fit and finish video talking about quality, maybe giving you some alternatives, and then probably next week we'll get into a bit of testing. Stick around, let's get into it. All right, so this is the Steve Carmelo Callari Tried and True. These were marked at $300 for sale. The fellow who bought this from me, I believe, paid $140 for it. And these often sell around or above 300 bucks. This is CPM D2 advertised at 64 HRC with a behind the edge thickness of about 5 thou and advertised as having a hollow grind. So as I already mentioned, this video is going to be about fit and finish. The next video will be about actual performance, but this knife was actually even surprising to me when it came in due to the fit and finish. Now, if you're familiar with Steve Callari, it's probably because he has a couple of YouTubers who do a lot of work for him. Neve's Knives actually has this to say.
I love Steve's knives. I hold him at a I highly regard him as probably the best heat treater in the game, doing some of the best heat treatments and just doing incredible work. I've tested a bunch of his steels. I've even had people send me their knives, and I've been able to sharpen them and test them. They never even went in video or anything.
Now, of course, if you're educated, for the most part, the issue with this is that you really can't test somebody's heat treat, generally speaking, without breaking or damage. So if you're just testing edge holding, for the most part, you're only testing hardness and edge geometry. So I did have actually higher expectations for this blade. Let's look it over. So this knife is unmodified. It is in the state that it came from Mr. Carmelo here. Now, except for the sheath had some issues. So the sheath was modified, and we will leave that out of things. And any damage to the finish on the blade itself, I will most likely attribute to the sheath itself. Maybe something got stuck in there. So we've got some difficulties here. I don't mind the handle finishing. It is a rougher finish, but that's what it was advertised as, and generally speaking, I don't mind that. Our first problem comes with the lanyard tube. This copper lanyard tube at the back wasn't chamfered at all. So in hand, especially you get any kind of pressure on this thing, you're going to notice that pretty quickly, especially in the left hand, oddly. I think one side's a little sharper than the other side. So one thing that you don't want is anything sticking out on your handle that is sharp. We've got glue seeping out from the handle scales at the front here. But we've got some scratching and stuff in the finish, like up here, that is not from Kydex. Again, on this channel, I really don't care about stuff like that. Here's what I do care about. So when you look at these plunge lines, you see how they're off right there? And you look at the blade, the entire blade is ground to one side. So much so that at this thickness, it looks like the doggone thing is diagonal. It's off like this. And so he's got it advertised here as a hollow ground blade. Let me just give Steve some props here. Not that he would ever reciprocate, but Steve's been making at this point for about 2 years. This is a recent example of his work. And there's not a lot of makers that really work on edge geometry and thin edge geometry. And thin edge geometry is really easy to jack up. So props to Steve for trying to go that route. Now we have this advertised as being hollow ground. And if I can focus well enough here, on one side of the blade, we're either flat ground or convex ground. There's a little bit of light on either side, whereas on the other side of the blade, we have a little bit of light showing in the middle. So, generally speaking, I would not call this knife hollow ground. I would probably call it flat ground. I find it interesting that he called it hollow ground. I'm sure he did it on a wheel, and technically it's probably hollow ground, but from whatever he had to do to probably fix or try and straighten the edge or do something else, it's no longer hollow, and it certainly is not centered. Now, Steve's talked a really big game about sharpening and has gone so far as to say that no custom knife makers, I'm assuming besides him, know how to hand sharpen. Not a single one of them, none of them can put a knife to the stones and do a proper edge. They all just will sharpen on their belts. So, if we can, when you look at this edge, it's pretty good until we start getting to the belly here, and you'll see a lot of variation in the sharpening up there closer to the belly. And we are also uneven. This knife allegedly has cut a few pieces of cardboard and one piece of nylon, and it is dull, specifically at the last half of the blade. From what I have heard from people, that is not uncommon. I also wanted to mention behind the edge thickness. Measured back here, we are looking, I measured it at 6.5 thou behind the edge. It's advertised at 5 thou. My calipers advertise themselves as having up to a 1 thou accuracy, so I'll say that's about right. Getting closer to the tip, we are closer to 7 thou, maybe even 8. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and assume he wanted to get a little extra thickness at the tip, which is also a little bit rounded there. Yeah, man. I'll tell you right now, showing edge geometry on a camera is very difficult, and showing grinds on a camera is very difficult, but the pictures don't lie. It's ground heavily off to one side. We also have general finishing issues, like you probably already saw down the spine and stuff like that. So why does it matter? Having a knife ground off to one side is simply a bad thing. So Steve is 2 years into this, and if Steve wasn't Steve, I would probably be disinterested in the knife, but also not care too much about it. However, when we've got influencers out here saying that he's one of the best heat treaters in the business, and that he's revolutionized the industry, but we have no evidence of quality of heat treat out there when it comes to anything that really matters, anything that actually pertains to heat treat. And when you have a guy who attacks other makers so much, attacks the ABS, and has used some of his influencers to specifically go out of people and harm their businesses, my own included, you should have your freaking your stuff a lot cleaner than this, especially at this price point, especially since he has attacked other makers for their price point on their knives. Now, let's not focus on that too long. Let's look at some good alternatives from honest knife makers who make a fantastic product in the same or in a similar category. All right, so the good news, guys, we live in America and the custom knife market is healthy. So I have a couple other makers that I would have liked to have mentioned who requested specifically that I don't mention them because nobody really wants to deal with Steve's crap. But let's go over a couple of blades here. Again, Steve was asking $299 for this. Here we have the Callari Knives Mako and Bowler N360. This is a steel that's very similar to LC200N or Zap Zefinite. So it's essentially stain proof with decent edge holding and decent toughness. We're looking at about 12 thou behind the edge. This thing is an absolute slicer. I've said in the past that I wouldn't feel comfortable with this being my go-to bushcraft knife, but there's a lot of things that I would feel comfortable with this knife being my go-to, be it EDC, or I feel like it would be really great for fish and some other things. Overall, we're looking at about $259 just depending on the options that you choose. This one came with this really nice pocket leather sheath. It's a little bit large for what it is. It feels a little bit big in the pocket, but it's just nice and it just works. So that's pretty doggone cool. All right, battery gave up the ghost on me, and I think actually the spare battery is about to do the same because it's so cold out. But this is the Very Good Knife Company Traditions Junior. This particular one's an ADCR V2 because I love that patina, but he also does Nitro V. On this blade, we are looking at about 14 thou behind the edge on what is actually a hollow ground edge. Very, very slicey, and this will come out at, I believe, about $150 with I would say, well, definitely better fit and finish than the Callari. So this is really an incredible value. If you don't care that much about fit and finish and you want a really practical, really slicey little blade with vastly superior kydex, this is a really, really good way to go. Also made in Georgia. All right, we got a good battery now. Next up, check this out. This is the Roland Cutlery Gopher, a chef-inspired knife by a really talented chef, again, in Georgia. A lot of these Georgia boys like these knives. All right, just coming in right at about 14 thou. This dude's work is so beautiful. All of these people that I'm talking about, I'll put their info in the description box below because all of these knife makers are knife makers that you should follow. So if I didn't mention it already, we're about 14 thou behind the edge, and we're looking at about $325 for a knife with these options. Just beautiful. And this came in a JRE, I believe it is, sheath. All right, now this knife is a little bit different. This is an old Tactical Pterodactyl. Frankie over at Tactical Pterodactyl makes some fantastic blades. He's always playing with heat treat and testing. This is our thickest boy of the group. We're looking at, what was this thing? About 25, yeah, about 25 thou behind the edge. Nicely ground, very practical knife. Now, I don't think that this knife was 25 thou behind the edge when I first got it, maybe 5 or more years ago. I did damage this knife abusing it, and I think I caught some staples the wrong way or something like that. This is 52-100 at 62 Rockwell, if memory serves. This thing might be actually be more like 7 years old. I think I got this blade from Frankie actually before he moved into his current shop. Anyways, so a little thicker behind the edge, but it's still in the EDC knife category. Your fit and finish is going to be nice. This knife is practical. And again, I damaged it. I think he reground it for me. And then I've also sent it to a few buddies who were knife nerds turned knife makers. Quite a few to play with. So this thing's just been around a lot. He just does such cool work. Definitely check him out. Last one of the group. This is one of my favorite knives, actually, despite the fact that I have not yet really abused it. We're at about 17 thou behind the edge, which I would say for a bushcraft knife with a thin edge, maybe a lighter use bushcraft adventure hunting camping knife, I'd say 17 thou would be right where I would personally want it to be. This one is Nitro V. These start at about $285. Of course, that's not with these options. I bought this at Blade Show. And I mean, just starting price, $285. There's just no comparison. I don't think I paid much more than $300 for this knife at Blade Show. I didn't talk him down. I went up there. I paid full retail price. He's a great guy making great knives. I don't think I paid much more than he charges. And this thing is just a thing of beauty, beautifully evenly ground. Just so nice. So again, all of these good people, these are all freaking salt of the earth people, honest people making honest products that are absolutely fantastic. Links to them will be in the description box below. All right, so that about wraps it up. Just to give a little bit of final context, when Steve first asked me to test his knives, it was well before he came onto my channel to give me all kinds of crap for uploading my Survive Knives video like 2 weeks late. Okay? Talked all kinds of crap. Lied out of his teeth, because that's what Steve does, and everything is just a very toxic person. The reason I refused to review his knives from the get-go wasn't necessarily because of his fit and finish. By the way, this is not a one-off fit and finish problem, because as you already saw in Neve's Knives, in his advertisement of the knives, in Blade Binge's own advertisement photos, you can see the absolutely terrible grinds. So this is not a one-off thing. And, oops. So the reason I initially said no is because Steve is a very toxic person who, like a lot of people, know him from calling out bad dudes who are doing something wrong, okay? Patty's potato peelers or whatever it is, and Survive, that's good. And a couple of other people who deserved truly to be called out. But he's also calling out other custom makers who are making their living making knives, trying to cost them sales, sending his people out to get these people working within his little sphere of shills and influencers. And at the end of the day, the bummer thing is that this knife doesn't sell for $300 because of the way that it looks, or even because of its edge geometry. The only reason that Steve Callari sells is through shills and marketing. It's just all marketing. You call out other people for call them shills. You call out all of these other people for doing exactly what you're doing, and then you get a little sphere of influencers promoting that. And you make a lot of noise and you attract a lot of attention to yourself. That's sales. That's the whole point. Now, the irony here is that I've been meaning to get to this video for like 2 or 3 weeks now. Got a lot of other stuff going on. So if, Steve wants to call me out for not doing this video soon enough and not actually getting into all of his, all of his crap. All Steve is doing is twisting my words and slandering me, and literally has calls to action for his people against me, slandering me. So if I were to take Steve's advice, I would do these videos quickly. They're not getting done quickly because I'm busy. You know, I don't want to be a guy who can't afford a pair of discs for his disc brakes for 18 months. So what's sad to me, God, I didn't want to get into this. All of these other people who requested not to be in this video, good people, making my lives a little harder because I'm trying to be respectful and dance around some good people's requests. But Steve attacks these people, tries to lose them money. They realize Steve has almost no platform whatsoever and is completely irrelevant. And you know what they do? They block him and his influencers, and they keep on working. And now they're making money. And while Steve can't afford a $180 pair of disc brakes, one of them's putting $40,000 into his knife business because he's actually making money. Ironically, Steve was calling him out for what he charged for his knives at $250, and now is selling an inferior knife for $300. So Steve doesn't care about like the reality of what words mean or anything else, but that's where we are at. I would be better off to block Steve and just go ahead living my best life. But you know, one of my followers bought a knife from Steve because of another influencer who I'll leave out for a little while because she requested it and she said she's trying to do YouTube differently. All right. All of Steve's people have said the gloves are off. My gloves are not off. So I will respect that for the time being, depending on how things go from here. But he bought one of these, and he's like, the sheath is horrible and the knife isn't even sharp. And I feel like an idiot because I didn't know you felt this way. I didn't know you knew anything about this. And so now I'm here trying to help people make educated decisions and trying to be a benefit to the community. And we've got somebody out here selling subpar products while yelling for the rooftops about how great he is, and people who literally come to me for advice didn't get it. Now, of course, they didn't ask, but it sucks. So for the use part of this video coming up, what I will do, I'm going to have to put an edge on this. So I'm probably going to have to do 2 practical videos here on this knife. Because I'm going to have to put an edge on this, Steve and his minions can say that I put a bad edge on it and that I ruined it. It's just going to go on the work sharp angle adjust. And so what I'll do for that is I intend to do 1 video with no cuts. I'll sharpen it. I'll test it at every point of the edge. I don't have an actual sharpness tester, but I guarantee you I can show that it'll be sharper than it is now. And then we will see how it holds an edge. If the guy who, my buddy who sent this to me said he cut a couple of pieces of cardboard and 1 strap of nylon and it's dull. If I sharpen this knife and it gets dull that quickly, I would deduce or guess, because that's what it would be without getting an analysis, it would be a guess. I would guess that in the process of grinding this thin, that Steve burnt the edge and ruined the heat treat. It would stand to reason. I feel like once I put a good edge, I just think it had a bad edge on it though. I think once I put a good edge on it, I don't think that'll be an issue. I think that geometry cuts, and I think that this thing will cut till the cows come home once I put a new edge on it. We'll see. If it does go dull, I will show that process with no cuts. I will edit the video to fast forward through a lot of the really long stuff because the whole process will probably take 3 to 4 hours. And then what I think I'll do is I'll also post the whole video without the fast forwarding. So no matter what, nobody can act like I'm some kind of freaking Hollywood editor or something like that. My editing's horrible, but someone will think that I faked something. And then I'm going to be honest with you. With how much I've heard from Steve and his crew, like you can heat Magna Cut, you can harden Magna Cut up to whatever, 64, 66. I don't care. I'm not quoting him. Whatever it is, but I don't care what Laren says. It's not going to break. This should be able to do basic tasks, and at best, I would say we will probably get microchipping. At worst, I would say we will get some macro chipping, some semicircular cuts on this thing. And you know what? A big part of that, it might not even come down to heat treat. It might just come down to how thin the edge is. I wish... So, I'm going to get ready to end here. But let me tell you what. So many people are sending me which video to watch to see when Steve Callari said this, that, or the other. And I'm going to make a whole video about this actually, but it bummed me out. And I'll tell you why. I have 1,700 videos on this channel. Maybe 20, 30 of them, maybe even 40 of them are calling people like Steve out. But none of them are calling, well, one other series of videos is calling out the ultimate survival tips guy. That was well earned. The rest of them are calling out Black Rifle Coffee and more of the veteran community because that's a personal and important issue to me. And that's all well earned. But for the most part, I don't operate this channel for views at all. I mostly review knives. And I do videos that are not going to get any views. Steve Callari, this whole thing happening with Steve Callari is exactly the kind of thing that people want to watch, and he still only brings 2,500 views because he's a nobody. Which is fine, I'm a nobody too. But it's certainly not for views. But what I realized when going through the absolutely horrible experience of watching a bunch of Steve's videos, what I realized is I think he's saying the exact same thing as I'm saying on a lot of his main points for the industry, probably 95% of the time. Straight up. When he's, he's never had to split a piece of wood to make a fire. He says he's only gone camping a couple times. Well, if you've never had to split a piece of wood to make a fire, then you've never done anything but car camping, which is fine. But that right there shows the amount of hard use experience you have. He talks about 1095 going dull when skinning out deer. And that happened to me. That was a big part of the beginning of my channel with a Tops MSK. And when I started getting into stainless steel knives, probably in 2014 or 2015 or something like that, when my buddy with his crappy little Schrade and 5CR who knows what from the gas station held an edge way better than my 1095 when skinning out his frozen deer. Talking about AEBL and Nitro V. So for the most part, the only places where I actually disagree with the guy is with hard use geometries and steels. You know, he's got this knife at 5,000 behind the edge. Not intended for me to use it, of course, but for somebody. Probably not intended for this, but I say 15 to 17 thou behind the edge is probably ideal depending on the grind for most uses, and he might say that 10 thou behind the edge is ideal. He might go more extreme. He certainly goes more extreme on hardness, but for the most part, the dude sees the issues with the industry, and the issues with the industry are real. The weird part is how he uses these issues and these topics to benefit himself and further himself, and to and the problem now is when there's good guys, let's say a few ABS guys, American Bladesmith guys that he's gone after, they didn't do anything wrong. They've got an 80 CRV2 knife that's probably 20 thou behind the edge, maybe thinner. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no excuse for Steve Callari to come out here white knighting super steel technology and try and cost this guy sales and affect this guy's livelihood because he uses 80 CRV2. And that's, we'll go a lot more into that, but it's sad to me because I have vastly more in common with Steve when it comes to my opinions about the industry and what a proper knife is. Vastly more in common than different. And there was a little bit where I was thinking, maybe when we go live, we can do something beneficial. Maybe we can benefit the industry. Maybe he could not be a piece of trash for, the 10 minutes that it takes, whatever it is. And then I remember that he publicly called me out and had a call to action against me, and then argued with me about the definition of the word you. He argued that he didn't ask me to review knives because he asked me to test knives. Right? If you can't have something in common with someone to the degree of agreeing on what the definition of you is, as a singular definition, not as a plural one, how could you possibly have a meaningful conversation when at least one person in the conversation only wants to damage? It's truly sad, the amount of damage that Steve Callari is doing to Steve Callari for no reason but his ego. And he blames me for losing knife sales. Steve, did I lose you your table at Blade Show? Was that me? Or is that you? After your buddy saw how you handled Whitty's situation, saw the true colors come out, you lose your table at Blade Show. That wasn't me, bro. You know who's losing you sales? You. Because you have higher standards for everybody else than you have for yourself, both when it comes to your product and when it comes to your integrity. This video wasn't supposed to be like this, but I guess that's how it was bound to happen. Talk to you in the comments section below. Guys, check out these other makers. Steve may be a liar, but even he, I'm sure, would tell you that any of these makers, he probably doesn't know a very good knife company, or probably wouldn't like them, I don't know. But he'd probably tell you any of these other people are fantastic, just good folks. And I know them all to some degree, and they're all good folks too. So if you are in the market, you're looking for a knife that's about $300, that's just a fantastic EDC or bushcraft knife, you check these people out. Support American business, support the American industry, and stop supporting degenerates. I guess that's it.